Welcome to the Blessors of Israel Podcast. I'm Matthew Dodd, Executive Director of Blessors of Israel. Honored to be in studio today with Pastor Rich Jones. He's the founder and chairman of Blessors of Israel. Well, Pastor Rich, when we look at the news revolving around Israel and its activities in the Middle East, first with Hamas, and then recently with Hezbollah, and then Iran, and now as of today, even a base in Syria that is basically run by Russia.
Exactly.
We have a situation that we continually hear, don't let it escalate, but it's escalating.
It's escalating very rapidly, and I think the concern of everyone is how to contain this from becoming a wider war. And I think we need to step back for a moment and say, okay, what is Israel's strategy? What has been their strategy? Well, I think starting with Hamas, clearly, they're going to end the threat. And they're going to take this as deep as they need to take it to end this threat. And we've seen.
And they said in September, just a few weeks ago, they had victory in Rafah, taken out 4 battalions.
Yes.
And it was at that point they made the pivot. They pivoted to the north, still with their eyes on Hamas. They're not done yet. We have the hostages that are there. They're committed to seeing them removed and brought to freedom. But nevertheless, you have Sinwar, who's still on the loose.
That's right.
Head of Hamas since Haniyeh has been eliminated from the scene. So, but then there was that pivot to the north with Hezbollah, because you have about 60 to 70,000 Israelis who are refugees within their own homeland because of the threat from the north. After October 7th, the next day, Hezbollah attacked Israel, and they've been bombarding the north ever since.
So let's kind of define a little bit about what's happening there. Let's go back to Hamas just for a moment, because I want to emphasize that I think one of the great strategic moves by Israel was to secure the Philadelphia corridor. Now, this is the corridor that runs essentially on the border with Egypt. And to secure this border is essentially to isolate Hamas. That was their main channel by which
cuts them off from all supplies from
all
through
supplies,
Egypt.
Because that's where they're coming in. I mean, hundreds of tunnels have been destroyed. Missiles have been coming through from Iran to control that corridor, and Israel is saying we're never going to give it up, which I would absolutely agree with. That's only inviting Hamas to rebuild if you ever gave that back up again. That was a strategic move. But now, having taken the Philadelphia corridor, now they can wait it out, you might say. They've isolated Hamas.
It's a chokehold.
It is. Absolutely a chokehold. But now let's go back to the north, because when Hezbollah, which is essentially in southern Lebanon, right at the border of Israel on the north, began to shell and send drones and missiles across the border, essentially about 90,000 Israelis have had to move and are living in hotels and with family to the south. And we know this actually because we've been trying to get hotels, and they're all full. And so this is a very, very big concern now. It's been, a year? They have been displaced.
Almost a year,
And, of course, we're coming up on the anniversary of the whole October 7 tragedy. So Israel, now having put what you called a chokehold, I think it's right, on Hamas, now we turn attention to Hezbollah. And I think that Israel is determined to do to Hezbollah what they did to Hamas.
I think you see, though, a different tactic, because with Hamas you had to worry about the condition of the hostages.
Right.
Now you don't have that concern whatsoever. So they are coming at them. And, Netanyahu on Friday, before the UN, said, speaking of Hezbollah, enough is enough.
Right.
And then right at that time, he had given the go-ahead before his speech.
Right.
Nasrallah, other officials were gathered around, likely watching that speech when bunker busters hit their headquarters.
And their strategy has been to cut the head off the snake.
Decapitate completely.
And that is working. I think they've eliminated all of the top echelon of leadership.
There's also the psychological warfare component. You had the pager incident, 4,000 pagers exploding, walkie-talkies,
Right.
something that Shin Bet had been working on for quite some time. And now reports are that Iran, the Ayatollah, he's paranoid. He's been in hiding since that took place, since Nasrallah was assassinated, along with one of his advisors who had actually sent a message. The Ayatollah sent a message to Nasrallah through one of his advisors saying, come out of Lebanon, come to Iran, twice. Nasrallah said, we're okay. My men were set. There's no infiltration of Israel here. And then it happened.
Right.
And now the Ayatollah fears that his own ranks have been infiltrated, and he does not trust anyone.
Exactly. And
It's gotten into their head.
Israel has. Psychological warfare is a very big part of warfare, as we know. And this is war. But we also see tensions to try to tamper this down from spreading into an all-out regional war. And Iran is the key to this. And they're the ones who have been, of course, funding Hamas, funding and training Hezbollah in the north. And now they see that Israel is absolutely dead set on victory over both Hamas and Hezbollah.
Wouldn't you agree something's pivoted? Because before all year long, what we have seen is that Israel was tempered, so to speak, and I think in many ways by public opinion, the United States.
Sure.
Something has changed. There's been a pivot. And as a result of that pivot, I believe Netanyahu, in fact, recent polls show support for him has increased in Israel when, frankly, he was on the cusp of being thrown out. And now they see leadership, and with that leadership, there is that support. And now not only are the Israelis taking notice, but other nations are as well. Because I think, in many ways, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, they miscalculated Israel. They thought it would be same as usual.
Right.
We will have our tit for tat. We'll have our spat. We'll make inroads. And in many ways, for the last year, I think Israel's lost the narrative in regards to managing Hamas. They've lost that narrative, but now there's a pivot. And now even global leaders are taking a different look at Netanyahu and what Israel's doing because they realize he means what he says.
Absolutely. And they must take the opportunity, right? They did not start this war, but they're going to take the opportunity to not only finish it, but to secure the future. And that's really the key. That's their strategy. Like the strategists in Hamas and Hezbollah counted on international pressure to get them to back off, to back down.
To get to a two-state solution. Because you got to remember, back in September of last year, Netanyahu was before the UN talking about the normalization with Saudi Arabia. And it was right after that, on October 2nd, that Nasrallah said, if any nation, Muslim nation, normalizes with Israel, there will be accountability. You will be held accountable. 5 days later, you had October 7th, blew up the whole thing in regards to any of that normalization. But guess what? It was because of the threat of peace in the Middle East that Nasrallah issued his threat, and then less than a year later, he's been eliminated.
But there are these Arab nations that are still wanting to normalize relations.
Including Saudi Arabia.
Including Saudi Arabia.
Which is the big one, because if you normalize with Saudi Arabia, then you have that corridor.
That's right.
That can bring trade, bring peace. In fact, that's what Netanyahu was talking about in his speech last year, this idea that with this normalization, we can bring life, not death, blessing, not a curse, to that region.
So therefore, those Arab nations are waiting. They still want that normalization of relations. Israel no longer is concerned about the sentiment of the world and the pressures against them. They have said very clearly, we'll go alone if we have to, although the United States has stood with them, Britain, France, Europe in general has stood with Israel throughout this.
But the UN, though, we have to be concerned about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I think you have the breeding ground for anti-Semitism.
Absolutely.
I mean, what they have going on there with the ICJ, the ICC, they are looking to take out Israel. It's nothing new, but it's intensified since October 7th. And so even with Great Britain, you've seen it pivot after the new administration came in. But then after what transpired with the death of Nasrallah, now there's a different level of respect. And they're coming alongside saying, you know, Israel does have the right to defend itself once again.
Yes. Now, again, the pressure is about containment. Let's not allow this to escalate into a wider regional war, because it has every possibility of doing that. And Iran is very concerned. They don't want it to be turning into a wider war.
Well, the thing about Iran is they want Israel attacked, but they just don't want to use their own military to do it. Any other Arab could do it. They just don't want the Persians to do it.
And exactly. They do not want to be directly involved, although they rattle their sabers and they make all these threats. They do not want direct engagement with Israel. And I think also they've seen that all of these missiles that they've launched now, waves of these missiles and drones, have virtually all been shot down.
Exactly.
And so all of it has come to no effect. But Israel, without any restrictions, can invade the airspace of Iran anytime they want to. They know there's a disparity there.
Well, that was one of the weaknesses of the Iranian military is their air force.
Exactly. But now I think we have another issue. Again, we are concerned about a wider escalation. Israel today, and we just are being informed of this now, has attacked a Russian military base in Syria. This is crossing a serious red line. Frankly, it's very dangerous what's happening here.
You know, up to this point, they've been fighting a seven-front war. Now you just opened up
the possibility
of another front.
That's as serious.
You just poked the bear.
Right. Now, what did they attack? They attacked weapons depots. And of course, their accusation is going to be that Iran is sending these weapons and hiding them.
So we're breaking up the supply chain.
Right. And in fact, it was shortly after an Iranian plane supplied arms did they make this attack. I think it was 3-something in the morning that it happened, their time. But this is a very serious concern. When you start attacking a Russian air base, military base, in Syria, the largest base they have in the region, this is a serious, serious escalation.
Couldn't agree more.
But we're trying to de-escalate. And I think there's going to be a lot of pundits who say, careful.
But at the same time, they've made it clear we're not going to permit Hezbollah to be weaponized again. They have been strategically taking out site after site, leader after leader. They're having a hard time filling in the ranks, and I'm sure there are many leaders who don't want to be filled into the rank just because they know what the outcome might be.
That's right.
So they're in a very precarious spot. But again, and then we also look back at biblical prophecy.
That's where I wanted to go next.
Because the attack on the Russian base does lead us back to the potential for, and we've been talking about this before with Blessors of Israel, the Battle of Gog and Magog, and how there will be this hook that will bring Russia in.
That's right.
And so up to this point, Russia's been somewhat quiet. In fact, I've been surprised at how quiet the BRICS nations have been. I mean, you've had some of the minor players,
South Africa particularly.
Yeah, but and China's been relatively quiet.
True.
Kind of like a slap on the wrist. Shame on you. You shouldn't take out, Nasrallah. But they haven't said much.
Right.
But at the same time, I've been waiting for, and I guess you are too, for what will it be that will hook Russia in? Well, attacking one of their bases could do just that.
You are poking the bear.
You are.
Right. When you start attacking the base, it's clearly a Russian base. You are attacking the bear. I mean, you are poking the bear. And we know that's what is going to be in the latter days. Russia will lead an alliance of nations against Israel. And so we are seeing that alignment. We're seing what we've called in the past an axis of powers. an axis of evil.
Axis
really.
of resistance is how they call it, and that's one of the other problems. Iran's axis of resistance now has been decimated because of what's transpired over the last year since October 7th.
Exactly. And, I mean, who would have ever guessed what would have transpired over the course of this time?
But what was it? And I know it's hard for us to know for sure, but there has been a pivot, and it was in September. But maybe even before that, where you saw Israel become more set and settled in, no, this is what we're going to do. We've made a commitment, and we're going to do it. But now it's one thing to say it, they're doing it. They have and to do so with great precision.
Exactly.
I mean, the things that they have done have surprised the global elites with the execution, the precision, the effectiveness of what they've done.
That's right. And I think that pivot, I mean, there could be much to be said about what drove it, but I think one aspect of that is that Israel has determined they are no longer going to cave to international pressure. We are going to do what we have to do to secure our borders in the south, in the north, and of course the Houthis are also still a part of this picture. Iran is part of this picture.
You're dealing with the West Bank,
That's
Judea,
what I was going to
Samaria.
say. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. That's a very big concern.
Exactly.
We don't hear very much about that, but that's still very much part of this picture. And so all of those protests and all of the international uproar that was such a big issue in the spring and early summer, Israel has come to the decision that's not going to stop us. Nothing is going to stop us. And now we're seeing the implementation of some very bold moves.
And that has frustrated the global leaders because they realize we can't control Netanyahu.
Right.
They can't control him. And yet there's a reason why they need to do what they do, because there's that existential threat. And if they do not take charge of their borders and see this battle to the very end, then Hamas, Hezbollah, the enemies of Israel will regroup and they'll come again.
Therefore, I think that part of the strategy, I think, of the nations is to recognize that if Israel succeeds in securing their southern border, their northern border, and quieting the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, and can contain the overall threat from Iran, there actually is going to be more peace. There is going to be a better situation.
Couldn't agree. I mean, even after Nasrallah was assassinated, the U.S. State Department came out and said, actually, he was a bad guy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's been in leadership for 32 years and had more blood on his head than Osama bin Laden, for the things that he's done both to the Americans, to the French, and to Israelis and Arabs as well. In fact, in Syria, Arabs were handing out sweets to one another after he was pronounced dead.
Yeah, he was not popular in Syria at all. But now we have to be concerned about a wider war. Nobody wants that. Everybody thought, okay, now if they succeed here with Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran is quieted down, there could be an advantage to the world in this. But now, crossing this red line with Russia...
especially after the missiles were launched from Iran, and then they came out immediately afterwards saying, okay, we're done.
Right.
As long as you don't fire anything at us, we're done.
Yeah.
I mean, they're clearly signaling we don't want to escalate either.
Right.
Why? Because the Ayatollah doesn't know what to do.
Right.
And he doesn't know who to trust.
And what is he going to... He has no more strategy, right? They're not going to invade by land. They have only the missiles and the drones, which clearly don't work.
His dear friend Nasrallah
is gone.
Haniya
is gone. The whole head structure of Hezbollah is gone and almost gone in Hamas. And they're being more and more isolated and weakened. So they're very concerned.
And about 4,000 soldiers are recovering from the pager attack.
Yes. And there's that. But now we have this issue with Russia. I'm very concerned.
I am as well.
About this move. And I believe, and again, we go back to what you were saying earlier, we have to see it strategically and prophetically.
Could you see how maybe if this was a shipment that was coming from Iran to that base, how Iran might be sending it to the base in order to bring Russia into the fold, knowing that Israel would attack the base or potentially attack the base. I mean, you can see how, these forces want to draw one another in.
That's right.
They want to bring in Big Brother, so
That's
to
right.
speak.
And so therefore, if that's part of the strategy, you have to say, hey, that's pretty good strategy.
It worked.
I don't like to say the word good. It is an effective strategy if it does bring in Russia.
And again, what we're talking about is setting the stage for the Battle of Gog and Magog,
right.
where you'll have the key players. You'll have Russia, Iran, Turkey, who, by the way, has stated very clearly it wants to join the BRICS. Here you have the first NATO member, wants to join the BRICS, says to NATO, any type of action by NATO to support Israel, we will veto. So clearly laying out his hand in terms of where he stands, Erdogan.
That's right.
So you have all of these players coming together. The stage is being set for the Battle of Gog and Magog. And Israel's becoming more isolated than ever before. We never would have thought that after the Holocaust, we would see, after October 7th, the things that have been leveled against Israel repeatedly on college campuses, in cities, and at the United Nations as well.
So what do we do now? And I know that you pray. I know that you and your wife pray regularly for Israel. My wife and I regularly pray for Israel. We need to be very concerned about this becoming a wider engaged war. I know the United States is, Europe is. What happened today could change the whole dynamic. Mm-hmm. We need to be, right now, very thoughtful, very prayerful. We need to stay on top of this. We will keep informing those that follow. We need to pray, but we need to stay informed, and that's what we're going to do.
Amen, amen. Well, it's been a blessing to spend this time with you, Pastor Rich, today, and we pray it's been a blessing for you as well. We'd encourage you to take a look at our website. Visit our website at www.blessors.org. That's Blessors with an O-R-S. .org. The reason why I want you to take a look at our website is, as Pastor Rich mentioned a moment ago, we curate news. Go to the newsroom. We curate news from sources all over the world, and we're looking for those sources of news that we are reliable, that we can trust, and give us an insight into what's going on with regards to Israel and the Middle East, but also how the stage is being set for the Battle of Gog and Magog. By the way, you can follow us on Facebook, Getter, and Twitter. We'd also ask that you like this video, whatever platform you're using, and make sure you subscribe to it as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Shalom, shalom.